The crowd outside the Viper Room didn't notice at first. It was just another night on Sunset Boulevard. Music, smoke, and the same young faces that filled every Friday in 1993. Inside, a band played. Outside, a 23-year-old actor stepped into the air, his body collapsing as if the ground had been pulled from beneath him. He had taken a speedball, cocaine and heroin mixed in a ratio nobody could sustain. His brother called for help. His friends tried to keep him conscious, but the noise around them swallowed the panic. By the time paramedics arrived, his pulse was gone. The report said, acute multiple drug intoxication. The crowd had already dispersed. The sidewalk was washed clean before sunrise. Hollywood rolled its cameras the next day. Same street, same angle, a new story written over the stain of the last. In New York, another man lay surrounded not by strangers, but by bottles. He was 28, an actor again, but this time the scene was his apartment. Silent, meticulous, clinical. The prescriptions were all legal. 6 in total: oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, doxylamine, each safe within its own range, each tested, each monitored. Together, they crossed the threshold where breathing becomes optional. No intent, no chaos, only chemistry. The medical examiner called it accidental intoxication by combined prescription drugs. The phrase was careful. It didn't name a villain, only a result. When the police sealed the apartment, they didn't find syringes or powder. They found a nightstand, a script, and a man who thought sleep was something you could engineer. He was right for a time. The next apartment was colder, darker, filled with music equipment and used coffee cups. The man inside had once sworn he'd never go back to heroin. 23 years clean, then 1 relapse. The bag was labeled heroin, but the chemistry inside was different. Fentanyl cut too pure for dosage. He injected half what a regular user might take. He died instantly. They found him with the needle still in his arm and 40 envelopes nearby, identical and unopened. The word bad batch appeared in headlines, but tests showed consistency. The danger wasn't the product, it was purity. The coroner called it acute mixed drug intoxication. His last script had been about isolation. When the crew returned to pack his belongings, they found pages of dialogue about addiction and mercy, written by someone who never believed he'd need either again. In Minnesota, snow still clung to the edges of the property. Inside the house, a man in a purple suit was lying near an elevator. He had pressed the emergency button. He hadn't made it out of the room. He'd been managing chronic pain from hip surgeries, medicating through the days with Vicodin. But the pills weren't Vicodin. They were counterfeit, pressed in an illegal lab, identical in color, size, and stamp, but filled with fentanyl. 2 milligrams can stop a body. The autopsy found 5 times that dose in his system. There was no trace of street life in the scene, no paraphernalia, no chaos, just trust and chemistry that didn't match the label. Police traced the source to a small-scale counterfeit ring operating out of California. They shut it down. Others replaced it within weeks. The case closed as accidental fentanyl toxicity. It wasn't accidental. It was industrialized fraud with a human face. His family never filed a lawsuit. The statement was short. He believed he was taking medicine. A hotel room in Florida. White sheets. Air conditioning turned too cold. A bottle of methadone near the bed. Chloral hydrate on the table. Benzodiazepines in the drawer. 10 prescriptions, 7 doctors, 1 patient. The woman inside was found unresponsive by her bodyguard after missing a meeting. She was 39. Her son had died 5 months earlier. The same combination, different sequence. The toxicology report called it combined drug intoxication. No single substance at lethal level. Just everything working together to slow breathing beyond recovery. The doctors denied overprescription. The pharmacies denied oversight. It didn't matter. Each prescription had been legal, each dosage technically safe. The problem wasn't what she took, but how many people said yes before someone should have said stop. Her death rewrote no laws. It only confirmed what medicine already knew. Legality isn't safety, and treatment without coordination is just arithmetic with softer lighting. Los Angeles again, June 25, 2009. A bedroom transformed into a hospital. An IV line taped to an arm that once signed record deals. The drug dripping into his bloodstream wasn't recreational, it was clinical. propofol, a surgical anesthetic used to keep patients unconscious during operations, not to put them to sleep at home. For months, his personal physician had been administering it nightly, trying to induce rest. That morning, the dose exceeded tolerance. Heart rate dropped. Breathing followed. The monitor showed flat lines where rhythm should be. The doctor delayed the call, hoping CPR would suffice. By the time help arrived, the body was already cold. The coroner wrote, "acute propofol intoxication." The court wrote, "involuntary manslaughter." Hospitals rewrote their supply protocols, adding tracking for every milliliter of anesthetic. Propofol became the first surgical drug associated with entertainment, sleep, and negligence in equal parts. The stage lights stayed off for days. When they turned back on, the world had learned that medicine, when misused for rest, can be indistinguishable from anesthesia for death. The water in the hotel bathtub was still warm when they found her. Perfume bottles on the counter, half a drink nearby, the mirror fogged over from steam. Cocaine, alcohol, and sedatives, a familiar trinity. She had slipped beneath the surface before realizing it. The coroner ruled drowning contributed to by drug use and heart disease. Her heart had worked through too many decades of stage lights and stimulants. The water did the rest. In the same hotel, 3 years later, her daughter would die the same way. Same combination, same sequence, same silence. The repetition didn't surprise the doctors. It rarely does. Addiction doesn't run in families. It repeats them. Across the country, another artist faced the same formula in a different container. Pills marked as oxycodone, bought from a trusted contact, crushed and measured like always. But this batch wasn't oxycodone. It was fentanyl, pure, potent, silent. He took a line, swallowed a pill, and never woke up. Paramedics found him slumped on the couch, music still playing through studio monitors. Toxicology confirmed counterfeit opioids. The dealer texted, "You good?" Hours later, the answer never came. That message became Exhibit A. In court, the charge was distribution resulting in death. The sentence was 17 years. The prosecutor said it was justice. It wasn't. The network that made the pills was never touched. 3 weeks later, the same batch reappeared in another city. At O'Hare Airport, customs officers waited beside a private jet. Inside, there were 70 pounds of marijuana, a handful of firearms, and codeine syrup packed in suitcases. The 21-year-old artist on board knew what it meant. He panicked. He swallowed several Percocet pills to hide the evidence. The flight had been long. Dehydration made absorption faster. Minutes after landing, he began to seize. Paramedics administered Narcan, but his heart had already gone into arrest. Oxycodone and codeine toxicity, said the report. The law called it possession with intent. He hadn't meant anything by it except to buy time. Time, as it turned out, wasn't interested. In Malibu, the air was quiet and the house was still. He had been touring with a fractured hip, performing through pain that never fully subsided. The medications came from multiple doctors. Fentanyl patches, oxycodone tablets, temazepam for sleep, all legal, all within range. He died at home, listening to his own recordings. His family said he'd been planning another tour. The coroner wrote mixed drug toxicity. The autopsy found no signs of abuse, only accumulation. When you balance pain and performance long enough, dosage becomes currency. He'd simply gone bankrupt. The tour had ended 3 days before his body did. A generation earlier, the room had been different, smaller, dimmer, but equally quiet. The woman inside was found face down on her bed, phone off the hook. Bottles of Nembutol and chloral hydrate sat open beside her. No syringe, no foul play, no note. Just mathematics, 40 pills, slow absorption, steady shutdown. The papers called it suicide. The coroner wrote probable overdose. The evidence pointed to neither certainty nor chance, just conclusion. The drugs had been prescribed to treat insomnia. They succeeded permanently. Her doctor lost his license. Her estate sold the house. The public memorized her final photograph. The line between sleep and silence became a headline. And then there was the athlete. 22, strong, invincible, newly drafted into the NBA. He celebrated with friends in a dorm room, drinking champagne, snorting a line of cocaine said to be pure. It was too pure. The heart isn't built for perfection. He went into cardiac arrest within minutes. No other drugs, no long-term use, just one night, one line, one system, shocked into failure. The autopsy called it cocaine-induced arrhythmia. There was no second chance. His death aired live across networks before his family even knew. The backlash was legislative. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 passed within months, imposing mandatory minimums for cocaine trafficking. A single overdose reshaped American law. The statute still bears his name. Fame doesn't insulate and youth doesn't delay. In another one, the body was found in a Brooklyn apartment, television still on, light from the screen flickering across the room. The air was still. On the table beside him, a small paper bag, torn open, a line of powder spread on the counter's edge. Heroin mixed with fentanyl, laced again with p-fluorofentanyl, 3 compounds, each one already lethal alone. He had bought it from men he knew by first name, part of a supply ring that stretched from the Bronx to Philadelphia. The product wasn't measured by purity, it was measured by yield. Each batch diluted, recut, and sold again, until no one knew what they were handling anymore. He had played addicts on screen for years, knew the chemistry, the rituals, the lies, and still believed he could measure control by experience. He didn't inject much, he didn't have to. The dose was already enough to stop his heart before the show he'd been watching reached its second act. The report said acute combined drug intoxication. The police traced the source in less than a week. 4 dealers arrested, 2 kitchens raided, 1 camera crew back at work the next morning. The prosecutors said justice was done, but the lab kept running. Each bag seized that week carried the same composition, the same powder that turned a character study into an obituary. He was one of thousands that year, not a relapse, not suicide, just another victim of arithmetic done wrong at scale. The difference between an actor and anyone else was that his silence made the news. In Buenos Aires, the walls of the rented house were lined with monitors, all unplugged. The cables were there for show, to make recovery look professional. The patient was a national monument, post-surgery, under medical supervision that existed more on paper than in practice. He had complained of stomach pain, fatigue, and confusion. No one wrote it down. The nurses were rotating in shifts, each assuming the next would check vitals. He had been given lorazepam for anxiety, quetiapine for sleep, levetiracetam for seizures, safe alone, lethal when mixed. His heart was already compromised. The sedatives turned strain into silence. When the nurse entered the room, the television was still playing a sports channel muted by static. He was lying on the bed, eyes half open, body cooling. The doctor who prescribed the drugs wasn't there. The neurosurgeon who had ordered home care hadn't visited in days. The ambulance was called 30 minutes after he'd stopped breathing. The autopsy recorded pulmonary edema and heart failure induced by combined medication effects. The medical board called it multi-causal failure. The prosecution called it manslaughter. 7 doctors and nurses were charged, not for giving the drugs, but for not being there when they worked together. Outside, the city mourned as if a country had lost a limb. His image covered stadiums, murals, screens. Inside the courtroom, experts debated the half-life of lorazepam, the toxic threshold of quetiapine, and whether silence could be considered intent. The trial still hasn't closed, but the outcome is already written. He had survived cocaine, painkillers, amphetamines, and the kind of fame that kills more efficiently than any drug. What ended him wasn't indulgence. It was medication without memory, a death signed by 7 hands, each holding a piece of the same prescription.